Welcome to the Poetry Box Live. I'm Shawn Aveningo Sanders, and we're thrilled that you could join us today to celebrate the winners of the Poetry Box Chapbook Prize. For those who are joining us for the first time, my husband Robert and I run an independent press here in Portland, Oregon, known as the Poetry Box. In addition to our ongoing work publishing poetry books and collaborating with writers from all over the country, we also hold an annual poetry chapbook contest. And our 7th annual contest is currently underway, but I'll share more details about that at the end of the show. We just released the chapbooks from our winners from our 2023 contest, where our first place winner was selected by nationally acclaimed poet and Pushcart Prize winner, Andrea Hollander. Thank you, Andrea. I am so excited to have all 3 of our winners sharing their gorgeous poetry with us today. We have Carol Barrett joining us from Bend, Oregon, Kirsten Morgan, who'll be reading to us from Golden, Colorado, and Richard Jordan joining us from Littleton, Massachusetts. Let's get started with our first featured poet. Carol Barrett was our 3rd place winner of the Poetry Box Chapbook Prize for Reading Wind, which celebrates the life of her father, a small-town doctor, accomplished musician, and man who was one with the earth. Carol has taught poetry and healing courses for several universities, having earned doctorates in both clinical psychology and creative writing. She began writing poetry to support widows in counseling, and her book, Calling in the Bones, won the Snyder Prize from Ashland Poetry Press. Growing up, Carol played piano and clarinet. Poetry became her music after several years as a choreographer and a dancer. An NEA Fellow in Poetry, she has published in a wide range of venues, including JAMA, the Women's Review of Books, Poetry International, Christian Century, and Poetry Northwest. It's my pleasure to welcome Carol Barrett.
Thank you, Shawn. And thank you all for being here. It's just so rewarding and gratifying. Really appreciate it. New friends, old friends, family members, thank you all. First thing I want to do is to thank Shawn for the wonderful job that she did with the cover of my book. I just love it. I told her I had in mind this robin on a twig to go with the final image of the final poem, and she found this photograph, and I absolutely love it. So thank you, Shawn. It's been great to work with. I'd like to start with a poem called Drug Thieves at the Doctor's Office. This is based on an actual event. My father's urology practice dealt in slow cash. In a small town, everything trickles at once. He'd poke and prod, quiz them like a teacher who knows no sure thing. They'd suit up, then follow him to the rose patch. The options all laid out, they'd pick the best. First Love, Sodder's Gold, Don Juan, High Noon, Carousel, Red Glory. Knife in hand, he'd travel the blooms, dropping a few cabbage heads from the Lancaster and York, a dark bruise from the Oakington Ruby, then snip a single bud of Peace or Mojave, its older cousins regaling the colors of patient care. If they weren't too ashamed of slim pickings, it was theirs. They never were. Even the old men with prostates flaring would recollect some widow down the block, sortie simmering on the way out the door. If cutting were the plan, he'd spell the risk longhand. Every inch his tools would touch, deftly mapped in a swift diagram, pencil held at point, like a thin blade, penetrating the layers of jovial fat and striated muscle, the intricate bones of his hands, entering the cave of their souls, like a small bird. Stone, leak, water, flow. He never used words they didn't know. Common payment? A bushel of Royal Anns, a box of early Bantam. His favorite bill, 2 Chinook from the wide Columbia, their gills still going. Complicated cases, he'd net half a side of beef or a full truckload of ripe manure for his Mount Shasta and Golden Fleece. The drug thieves came and went. Their part in the annals of Cowlitz County snuck into bloom. Not the screwdrivers that forced the lock, the only costly equipment, a luminous microscope still tracking the enemies of men and rose leaves. Missing 4 syringes, 7 carefully calibrated jars of fresh urine from the small refrigerator next to my mother's picture, a glorious Queen Elizabeth, not quite unfurled. This next poem is called Columbia. Maybe because he can trace the family back on 2 sides to both Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, my father yearned after the expedition trail. He bought a canoe and persuaded his new son-in-law to push off down the Columbia. Packed with the first day's provisions, they paddled with the current. A few hours out, they ran smack into a gale. Took every bit of brain and brawn to keep from capsizing. An old logging chain dropped in the hold for ballast, shoulders working like oxen. The first thing that saved them was blowing into a sand dune in the middle of the fog. They crawled out, hunkered under ponchos, and waded out the torrents, canoe against their backs like a great whalebone. Overnight, they parceled cold sandwiches and stared into the face of machismo. No water, no matches, a low-lying mass without color or flares. The second saving grace was my younger brother. They couldn't risk his life with their own, stayed put till the whitecaps bobbed like mere ghosts. My father's respect for Lewis and Clark has blown wide as the wind, but he has decided he'd rather be related to Sacagawea. Who knows? Maybe he is. The bird, for my mother and father. They thumbed through Birds of the Northwest, trying to name a newcomer. I, too, catch his act this morning at the suet feeder, swinging between the camellias, yellow beak, my father is sure of it, nibbling cautiously while tail feathers bobble. Ever since courting, they have tracked the migrations of aerial friends. They talk eyes and wings. They are sure this tail has streaks of white. See? There! Too small for a wren or sparrow, he defies ID. This worn, slim volume has witnessed their rarest sightings, decade after decade, whenever need darts about. The cover is ruffled, pages smudged, vestiges of butterhorns, perhaps our version of suet. They settle finally on common thatch, as the light breast and black head fit the scriptural habitat west of the Cascades. I expected a more exotic tribute, given their whispered wonderment, heads tilted together. The bird, now named and known, pecks his way into their glad world, flits to a rafter to watch the watchers. They are between surgeries, my mother for crushed vertebra due to a fall on the slate beneath the feeders. My father for cataracts splitting his pine trees in two. I have come to cook for a while, fold the clothes, closer now to this ritual of discernment, window, bird, and book. They know more birds than I could list in a year of Sundays. Recognize the whirring duet, repeat visitors, two hummingbirds who linger into dusk, even when names of friends escape recall, their gray heads bent to pain as they wait once again for the wings of grace. Thank you. This next poem is called Pleural Effusion, which I had to learn. It's a medical term that has to do with what happens when liquids get into the lungs that are not supposed to be there. And my father was treated for this condition. He cannot hold the long notes on his euphonium, must catch another quick breath, no rest in the score. Tending his garden, he studies the four elements: earth, air, fire, water, transposes to another key: sun, wind, rain, stone. He turns them, rolling the words like pages of music: leaf, bird, heart, song. Things come to him as quarter notes, staff lines drawn out on his yellow tablet. These days he is cold, adds a jacket over flannel shirt, gets his bearings, fingering the valves: E flat, D, B, F, melodies rising from the dust. A needle under ribs pierces the inner chest wall. He walks 2 liters lighter. Home declines the 4 corners of the bed, fills the green watering can, measures a 1/4 cup of cane sugar, falling like sand. He stirs it as if wielding a baton, carries the sweet brew to the hummingbird feeder, waiting. Leaf, bird, heart, song. This next poem, I have to change hats because this is written in his voice. And so that'll have to do for one of his hats. It's called Going Out in Style. Reckon I'll be gone in 3 months. You never know. I'm trying a social experiment. The ladies come to supper all gussied up well before the appointed hour, lined up in their finery like orchids on a lean branch. But the men, they come drab as the boondocks, like they just got off their horse out near Lexington or Castle Rock. And we all know the farm's long gone. No stallions kicked that field in 20 years. What I'm fixing to do is wear my bow tie down to dinner. Different one every night. See if I can get a gentleman or two to follow suit. Come to dinner like they are going out on the town, like they really mean it. The ladies deserve some civility. We only have so long. And the final poem I'm going to share with you is called Elegy for My Father's Passing. The river knows its banks, cushions tender steps with sand, a few pebbles floating on minor laps, ripples on this scalloped table spread. What is served? Memory. the chill of late afternoon, late coming. Here and there, a bit of bark with swirled eddies. A dragonfly dares a blade of grass, wakes you to the moment. The river knows the bottoms of old boats, cradles them, receives their blue oars, the kayak's quick paddle dripping the river back to itself, like a dream playing over and over, color changing with the light, gray, tawny, amber, rose. The river knows the mist that hovers, loose shawl about your shoulders, knows the time will come when the mist lifts above banked logs, silvered huckleberry leaves, the thicket of proud alders where once gushed flame. It will lift and disappear, settling perhaps on the beaver, nosing the creek, or shrouding a mallard on the lake where licorice fern adorns the shallows. The river trusts the spring surging through ancient rock, salmon berries riding the breeze on prickly branches, bright green algae pooling in still cul-de-sacs, feeding the slim fish that glide into dusk or dawn, never sleeping. The river knows what comes, comes again. Though you shiver in the cold and righteous night, spill a torrent of grief, though you holler in ravine-haunted hills, still a robin lights on a twig, cocks its head, apprehends all that is intended, jumps and flies. Thank you.
Oh, Carol, what a beautiful tribute to your father. When I first read the manuscript, and you didn't read this poem, but it was the title poem from the book, and the first two lines, when yellow light drifts down soft as dove wings folding, my father would say, storm's coming. Those lines just transported me to my own childhood. They reminded me of my grandmother, who always proclaimed, smells like rain. And she was just as accurate as your father was. And I think that's part of the magic of this book, is that these deeply personal poems, and then with all the lovely bird imagery flitting through, it just has this beautiful ability to take us to moments in our past where we feel this deep connection to our own families, and especially those that we have lost. And I just think it's such a special collection. So I want to thank you for sharing these beautiful poems, these stories with us today. You're a masterful storyteller, and I think I would have liked your dad. He sounds like an amazing man. So thank you so much. Our next featured poet is Kirsten Morgan, who was our second place winner of our contest for her chapbook, Inside Out, which was inspired by her volunteer work at a homeless clinic and women's day shelter. Kirsten has taught poetry to children in an independent school, elders in a lifelong learning program, and clients of the Gathering Place. She is a longtime member of Denver's Lighthouse Writers Workshop, has published many poems in literary journals, and was a finalist for the Birdie Prize from Meadowlark Press. She is the author of Without Skipping a Beat, A Child's Heart Transplant Journey, editor of One Day, One Night at a Time, and co-editor of An Uncertain Age, Poems by Bold Women of a Certain Age. Kirsten likes to hike, snowshoe, read incessantly, and write poetry delightedly. It's my delight to welcome Kirsten Morgan.
Well, thanks, Shawn, and thanks to you and Robert for holding us in such competent hands throughout this process. I really appreciated working with you, and I'm I'm so grateful to you for that. And thanks, Andrea Hollander, for your impeccable taste in choosing these three manuscripts. I appreciate you, and I'm delighted to be in the company of my fellow winners tonight. So thanks. And I love seeing all of you peeking out from squares around the country and around the world. Thanks for coming. I don't have too much more to say. I wanted to make sure that you understood that this book is about the experience of homelessness and attendant poverty, because that's the theme throughout. It's an uneasy book. The poems are uneasy, the lives are uneasy, but it's a reflection of reality, and it's a reflection of a group of people who are not often seen and certainly not understood. I met hundreds of women over the many years that I taught this class at the Gathering Place, and heard thousands of stories, and it was hard to choose the ones that I wanted to represent in this book. But I made that choice, and here they are. I want to say also that every woman represented in this book is real, and every story is true. Only the names have been changed. The first poem is Inside Out. At the wrong end of Broadway, where few venture without bad business, crouch women without houses, fearful, huddled masses yearning for anything, everything. Their eyes look for scraps, watch for holes, each person a threat, each encounter a trial. They leave few ripples, stay invisible. This life is unkind to health and can't remember ease. It falls between scaffolds and holds on for dear life. As the world looks the other way, its leftovers hiding in alleys and under bridges. And the next poem is about one of the clients, who I'm calling Beatrice. I think of you far too often not to wonder where you went when you slid out the door like butter off a hot pan. I think of how your first words left scars on sweat-stabbed pages, silent screams begging that someone hears someone too gagged and girded to speak. I knew this wasn't you. The woman who once put numbers in order, got a paycheck, turned a key, and heard a bolt shift to safety. Now the job gone, money gone, home gone, and your daughter in college free. So you followed her here because she was all you had. I remember the way your sass slipped out, the only true thing in a sty of lies, where help was a theory and stuck was a way of life. How you spoke it straight while those who pulled your strings slunk a crooked path with muddy mouths and side-shift eyes. I can't forget. As empty months slogged by, those poems you flung onto paper with a feather dipped in grease, words like flapping birds always trying to take flight. I can still see you, holding your ear to the page and waiting for the next day to step from behind your grief and say, it was just kidding. Here is a job, here is a paycheck, here is a house and a promise, and the world will see the you behind the laugh and voice shiny as Sunday song in the church you love, because you will have revised yourself from this latest of many deaths, and everyone who meets you new will believe things have always been as smooth as your easy smile and cream slick words. Street prayer. This prayer is for women who carry their lives in bags and minds in sieves, who tiptoe through beasts of city where blinders are issued at the gate, where breasts speak to hungry men who trade protection for sex, where they wander labyrinths with snapping streets, stenching alleys, and no place to sleep untouched. These women once had homes and men who beat them, then told them they were lucky. They had children who can't forgive their mothers for spreading bread with fear. This prayer is for that band of nomads who cling together through the day, then scatter into streets at night. Creatures who can see through eyelids, smell threats like coming rain, whose feet are bound, hands perpetually tied. Through it all, their Savior stays real and near. They talk with him, whine at him, still trust the only man who seems to care. But one believer on a bitch of a mean-ass day just couldn't hold back. Sweet Jesus, she wailed. I keep praying and still don't hear no answers. Where are you, Lord, when we need you? Drinking cheap wine and sleeping it off like all the rest. True story. Cynthia, your clothes carefully chosen from thrift shops, hair coiffed in the shelter's cracked mirror. I imagined the woman you used to be, determined to stay in the best parts of the life you once knew. The life beyond lies and purple beneath concealer, the life of leisure and terror, of smiles for the public and teeth replaced without fanfare, because it was worth it, because there were no doors in your house that opened outward, and so you stayed until he tried to kill you, and you ran fast in every direction and still can't stop glancing over your shoulder, because you know he'll never stop looking for you. At a loss for words, untethered, unhoused, they find each other on the streets, stay close but not too, move in shifting circles where trust is slippery but need is greedy. Who else cares if they fall, break, disappear, lose themselves? Who else cares if they're robbed, raped, starved, ignored by the system? One woman lost her journal to a thief, her soul and words, her real life gone. The perp seemed to need the secrets of another, to carry her own, needed to step into other shoes, click her heels 3 times to transport her heart back home. Who cares? Who will offer solace for lost words, empty puffs of promise when spoken, specks of possibility when written, bluffs of amnesia when gone? Grace. 80 years old, you stood stick straight, long white hair, jaw clamped, eyes that saw straight through mendacity. Pride in every word and gesture, for you had been honored among your people, shaman, holy woman, healer. You wrote with the grace of a swan, words that skimmed paper with wandering reveries, but wrote nothing we could search to find your other years. You wouldn't seek help, wouldn't take offers of shelter, too contained, too many walls. Wouldn't take money, had your own ways, they say. Sold your only true possession in the parking lot behind the Shell station, in the back seats of cars after dark, a piece of your holy body. For enough money to live like a wild thing, spend nights in a sleeping bag in the alley behind the shelter where no one could make you breathe their inside air. Vigil. On a blue, cold evening each December, we gather outside the city and county building, all born free, equal under the law, people who care that hundreds in the crowd will sleep outside this night in Denver, and some will die. We gather with candles and words, sing songs of sorrow, and say goodbye to all who have slipped this coil in the last 12 months. Speak the names that are known, those who died as they lived, empty of spirit, bereft of bed. Mary Martinez, we will remember. John Jones, we will remember. The man in a wheelchair at the corner of Spear and Broadway. The woman too sick to leave her cardboard nest below the overpass. Will we remember? Most of us go home to warmth, write a check, dream of sleeping on an iceberg, feel a knot of hunger in full stomachs, and by morning, move back into our easy lives, uneasy in knowing that some of those who hold a candle tonight will soon die on a park bench, in an alley, at the hands of a thief, a freeze, or exhaustion from pushing that rock up a mountain. Kim, I loved the way you spun stories of your travels, 30 years, hundreds of miles, on foot, park benches, ditch toilets, dumpster food, wonders everywhere. I wasn't always mad, you told me. College, job, marriage, son. I wasn't always like this. My whole family had uneasy brains, and one by one went mad. My brother jumped off a ship at sea. My mother left in and out of madness every day of her life before she took it. So when I went mad, I wasn't surprised. Couldn't keep a job, couldn't keep my son, dropped him off at his father's, and now he's grown and could be mad too. You loved that word mad. Something about its old-fashioned literary sound, like the ant in the attic, appealed to your delight in language. Your brain, diamond dense and sharp as a scream, loved the dance of words, collected them in haystacks, hoping to find a prick of sanity. We talked for hours about the world, about politics, religion, the ways humans seek safety, about visits each night from Archangel Gabriel, who instructed you in ways of the spheres, who pulled you through the veil, then pushed you back again before the sun, who told you who had died in the night and who would leave soon, and you didn't tell me. But I think he named you next, because you said goodbye in a different way when I left that last time. And when I came to visit again, you had tossed your bonds to pace upon the mountains overhead and hide your face amid a crowd of stars. And that last line, many of you know, is borrowed from William Butler Yeats. My last poem is called Today's Writing Prompt. What would you do if you knew you could not fail? The woman without a bed who writes with probity and wades through mystery, who is grateful beyond measure and hopeful without reason, often hungry, always in pain, rarely able to sleep, thinks for only a moment before writing in her careful hand, I would achieve enlightenment. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Oh, Kirsten, this book, this work that you do is so, so very important. We all see how this homelessness crisis has erupted in every major city across our country. It's just not where you live. And we need people like you who don't turn away. People like you who remind us that these women, these people in need are real human beings. I really wish every city councilman, every mayor, everyone who has said, not in my backyard, would read this chapbook, could hear you recite these poems. I just want to thank you for writing these. I want to thank you for sharing these. Yes, they're difficult, but they're so necessary. We need to have our hope broken for action. Thank you for listening to and helping and honoring these women and giving them a voice. I mean, it's just the spectacular work. So keep fighting the good fight.
Thank you.
And now for our first place winner of our chapbook contest, Richard Jordan, author of The Squannacook at Dawn, which explores the loss of his father, the peace of the natural world, aging, environmental change, and spirituality. A PhD mathematician by training and data scientist by vocation, Richard has been an avid reader of poetry for almost as long as he can remember and has been writing poetry for 20 years. His poems have appeared in many literary journals, including Tar River Poetry, Rattle, where he was a finalist for the Rattle Poetry Prize, Sugar House Review, New York Quarterly, and Autumn Sky Poetry Daily, among many others. Here's what our judge, Andrea Hollander, had to say about Richard's winning collection. Each of the poems that comprise the Squanicook at Dawn are so well crafted that the art is all readers experience. Each poem begins with a sense of welcome and closes unpredictably, yet inevitably. No better ending seems possible. This is high praise, but it's not my only reason for selecting this manuscript as the winner. Read together and in the order they appear, these 20 poems create what feels like a 21st poem, the chapbook itself. The poet has not only written 20 fine poems, none in imitation of another in content or form, but when read straight through, the poems provide readers with a tightly woven and beautiful verbal tapestry. And now, to share his tapestry of poems, we welcome Richard Jordan.
Thank you. Yeah, this is really pretty amazing to me. This is the first collection I ever put together, actually. And just to share, look at the beautiful cover. Thanks to Shawn for selecting this. I mean, that looks like the Squanicook River. It really does. It's amazing. And also many thanks to Andrea Hollander for selecting my book and her words about it. And, given that this is my first collection, this is really my first reading of any kind. So be gentle. And I noticed my brother's in the audience. And so a lot of these poems come from my childhood, about my father, an amalgamation of sort of other characters from my childhood, but no poems about my brother. I'm saving those for a later book. So, yeah, just so you know, Ken. So, so without further ado, I'll get into this. First poem is called Casting from Shore. A red-winged blackbird in the empty bottle of bud my father tilts to catch the breeze bring music to the air this final day of summer. And while trophies have been scarce, no bass biting, only small white perch, I know they're out there somewhere, possibly beyond the island where lily pads grow thick, where mergansers dive, where other kids with other fathers have drifted in new fiberglass canoes, the kind we can't afford. But nonetheless, we're here today, while they are not. And soon, real soon, I'll reach that spot. I'll craft the perfect cast. Hold on, my father says. He bends to trace a cross on my tanned forehead with his free hand, then points skyward as I launch the barb high, aim to split a cloud the way he taught. And this next one is called First Caddis. So a caddis is a type of fly that trout love, and they love the larvae especially. And therefore it's a type of fly the fishermen love to tie. So this is First Caddis. Musty fur and rusted hook. This is my oldest elk hair caddis. The first fly my father let me tie myself. He lifted it to the lamp, said, "This will do." And yes, it raised a bright native speckled trout from Trap Fall Run, like I'd only seen before in field and stream. My father took the fish from my line, placed it in my hands, but it shook free, slid down the gravel bank back into the water. I watched it dart away, splashing across a riffle to a shaded pool beyond my casting reach. "Don't worry, where there's one," he said, striking a match against an oak to light his pipe, an iridescent scale glued to his thumb, glinting in the April morning sun. And this one's a prose poem. And it's called Jesus on the River. So sometimes he thinks he should enter the church, but the river holds him with kingfishers that rattle back and forth across a quiet pool, slate blue wingtips almost dipping in, more graceful than clergy. From a boulder in the middle of the pool, he can see parishioners go through the doors. They're small from up there, like dolls. Meanwhile, he admires the way a trout faces the current to breathe and consume what's delivered by the flow. That would make a good sermon, he imagines. It's the one he would give. And let's see. This is another prose poem called Mackerel Day. It's a mackerel day, my father used to say, when the lighthouse far up on the island disappeared, and fog swirled thick and low over the breakwater. My father puffing his cognac pipe tobacco, me wearing his old red baseball cap. The two of us standing on slick rocks, threading silver treble hooks with clams. Seagulls circling closer and closer. They knew we'd save some bait. With the moan of a ship out there somewhere, or maybe a whale, and I'd ask when the lighthouse would come back and flash, soon. And my father was always right, and sometimes, often, I still wake at dawn with a taste of salt air tingling my tongue. And this is called With the Current. We're at the Squanicook again. The trout is stirring as my father leans against a willow, watches dimpled rings emerge, where open mouths poke through the surface, pluck drowning damselflies. We've come to choose, perhaps simply imagine the perfect spot to spread his ashes when he's gone. This place right here, he says. Yes, this place where he taught me to cast upstream and let the river present the fly the natural dead drift way. Stay with the flow. The current feeds the trout what arrives. A rainbow leaps. Another. My father takes a step toward the water, bends to dip a finger, slowly rises. We're not here to fish today. We left the car in idle. Steady hum reminding us to go and do what might need doing. This bright May morning, now approaching noon. And let's see. This one is called Returning to Vermont. Could have sworn I'd find the place by heart. The deep, clear pool we once chanced upon, where splashing loud and naked, we flushed out a rainbow trout, long as a forearm from its shade between the bank and polished stones. This will always be our spot, she said. It was early October then, as now. But what's become of the sunlit pumpkin field, the ripe macawns that spice the air? Already north of Stowe, I should have passed that cedar fence, the Holsteins stretching their long tongues to taste the other side. I'm lost, though I won't turn around. How to explain? Ahead, the leaves and sky fuse burgundy and fuchsia. See, she used to paint. She could have painted that. And this one is called Ice Out. This morning, two young boys came riding by my house on bicycles, waving fishing poles, splashing through fresh puddles from March melt. I could hear them way down the road, such laughter, a shout or two, more laughter. Red-winged blackbirds went silent as the boys sped past, but shortly started back strong with their check, check, check. Then a chipmunk shimmied up the feeder post, the first I've seen since well before Thanksgiving. At the lake, the channel ice is broken. It flows away through the culvert. Fish hang deep. Likely won't chase a lure in such frigid water. Still, the boys came riding, causing a fleeting commotion. They'll surely grow someday to understand patience in these ancient patterns. I pray it's no time soon. And this one is called What Was There? So the last one is, I think, hopeful of spring coming with the ice out. And this one also is hopeful of spring. We actually hit 60 degrees here today, believe it or not, in Massachusetts, but it's going to be back to winter, but we can still be hopeful. So what was there? Netted 3 sleek native brookies, spots and pelvic fins, the brightest red I've ever seen. Released them back into the clear, swift water. Hiked a mile to get to that place. Over the last remnants of snow, a little ice. Bushwhacked the final half through bramble and twisted vines. Waded another mile at least across slick stones. Once there, just me all day, along with 2 young mallards, a kingfisher, a dozen or so fluttering spring azures, momentarily a mink, a small gurgling waterfall, smelled sweet smoke drifting by, like the purest maple sap boiling down. Yes, there must be a sugar house in heaven. And I'll close it with the title poem, The Squannacook at Dawn. Where the riffle spills across smooth cobble and slows to fill this quiet pool, the moon, undulating on the surface, slips through my fishing net. Another rainbow trout has shaken loose, but oh, that cool splash of water on my face, that great horned owl asking who. As usual, it's me twitching my old caddisfly to find whatever's stirring at first light. Not bothered that my krill is empty. See, no matter where I go from here today, the river will be with me. Let it flow.
Oh, thank you, Richard. You know, I have to confess, I'm not much into fishing or know much about fly fishing, and I've never heard of the Squannacook. So when you came across your manuscript on the first read through, I thought, well, I don't know if I'm really going to get this very much, you know. And then I read the first poem, and I was hooked. Pun intended. Even though you can randomly open this book to any poem and really enjoy it, there is a visceral pleasure in reading it from start to finish. And quite frankly, the whole collection just takes my breath away as I read it. And each time I read it through. So I want to thank you for entering our contest, for writing these gorgeous poems, and for sharing them with us today and having your first reading. Bravo. Well done.
And I just want to point out, Ken, yeah, definitely there'll be poems about you. That's my brother. He's there. So they're coming.
All right, Ken, we'll be looking forward to reading those poems. Well, let's have a giant round of applause for all of our readers today. I really want to thank our 3 talented poets, Carol, Kirsten, and Richard. And I want to thank you, our audience, for supporting our authors and joining us for another edition of the Poetry Box Live. We'll be back next month on March 9th with 3 more poets. We'll have Sue Fagalde-Lick, James K. Zimmerman, and Emily Sue Sloan, who each have chapbooks that are available for pre-order for just 5 more days. So be sure and check them out on our website. I'd also like to remind all the poets out there that we are now open for submissions to our 7th annual chapbook contest. We will again be awarding publication to 3 poets, and our guest judge this year is the award-winning poet Donna Hilbert. And you can find all the details on our website. And if you'd like to keep up to date on upcoming shows, new releases, other publishing opportunities, you can subscribe to our monthly newsletter by going to thepoetrybox.com, where you'll find a sign-up form at the bottom of each webpage. Thanks again for joining us today. We'll see you next month on the Poetry Box Live.
Ciao.
Then,
Wonderful.
Roaring 20. Oh,